Have you ever wondered what really happened to Jesus' 12 apostles? We hear stories of brutal executions, cruel persecutions, and dramatic ends, but how much of that is actually true? Were they all martyred in horrific ways, or have their deaths been exaggerated over time? Today, we'll dive deep into historical records, compare ancient sources, and uncover what we really know about the fate of the apostles. And trust me, some of these stories might not be what you expected. Before we begin, let's set the stage. The apostles were Jesus' closest followers, spreading his teachings across the world after his crucifixion. But there's a problem. Much of what we know about their deaths comes from oral traditions, passed down for generations before being written down. That means details may have been altered, exaggerated, or even invented. The earliest sources, like the New Testament, mention very little about their fates. Instead, most of the stories we hear today come from texts written centuries after their deaths. So how do we separate fact from legend? Let's break it down, one apostle at a time. First, we have Peter, one of the most famous apostles. Tradition says he was crucified upside down in Rome under Emperor Nero. But where does this story come from? The earliest reference is from the writings of Church Father Origen, over 200 years after Peter's death. There's no Roman record confirming his execution. However, Christian tradition strongly holds that he was martyred for his faith, and later sources like the Acts of Peter solidified the dramatic imagery of his upside-down crucifixion. Could this be true? Possibly, but without hard evidence we can't say for certain. Next we have Andrew, Peter's brother. His story is just as dramatic. He was supposedly crucified on an X-shaped cross in Greece. This image is iconic, but like Peter's case, the details come from much later traditions, particularly the Acts of Andrew, written centuries after his time. Some sources claim he preached for 2 days while hanging on the cross before dying. However, Roman execution methods don't match this description, raising doubts about its authenticity. Then there's James, son of Zebedee, also known as James the Greater. Unlike the others, his death is actually recorded in the Bible itself. In Acts 12:2, it says that King Herod Agrippa had him executed by the sword, making him one of the few apostles with a clear, historically supported fate. His remains are believed to be in Santiago de Compostela, Spain, where he's honored as the patron saint. But did he actually travel to Spain before his death? There's no historical proof of this, making it one of many debated aspects of his story. John, the brother of James, is said to be the only apostle who died a natural death. While many apostles were reportedly killed for their faith, John supposedly lived to old age in Ephesus, even surviving a failed execution attempt in Rome, where he was allegedly boiled in oil but remained unharmed. The earliest sources suggesting this come from Tertullian, writing nearly 200 years later. But did John truly escape martyrdom? Some versions claim he was exiled to the island of Patmos, where he wrote the book of Revelation. The truth? We may never know. Moving on to Thomas, famously known for doubting Jesus' resurrection. His death is one of the most unique. He is believed to have traveled to India, where he was speared to death by local authorities. This tradition is strong in India, particularly among Christians in Kerala, who trace their faith back to Thomas. But historically, the evidence is thin. The earliest records supporting this come from the Acts of Thomas, a highly legendary document written centuries later. So while the tradition is meaningful to many, it lacks definitive proof. Philip's death is another mystery. Some say he was crucified upside down like Peter. Others claim he was hanged or even stoned. Most sources agree he was martyred in what is now Turkey, but the specifics remain unclear. The Acts of Philip, written long after his time, adds dramatic details, such as him performing miracles before his death. Again, without historical confirmation, we can't be sure what really happened. Bartholomew's fate is perhaps the most gruesome. Tradition says he was flayed alive before being beheaded, likely in Armenia. This story appears in various medieval texts, but like the others, it has no contemporary Roman records to back it up. Some historians believe this legend may have been influenced by later Christian martyrdom narratives rather than actual historical events. James, son of Alphaeus, also known as James the Less, has an unclear fate. Some sources say he was stoned to death, while others claim he was thrown from the temple in Jerusalem before being beaten to death. These accounts come from later Christian writers like Hegesippus, but the lack of early documentation makes it difficult to confirm. Jude Thaddeus and Simon the Zealot are often linked together, as some traditions say they were martyred in Persia. One version claims they were killed together by the sword, while others say they were executed separately. These stories, mainly, come from apocryphal sources, so their authenticity is debated. Matthew, the tax collector, is said to have been martyred in Ethiopia, though some traditions say Persia instead. Some claim he was stabbed to death, while others suggest he was burned alive. Again, the stories differ, and none of the earliest Christian writings provide clear evidence of his fate. Finally, Judas Iscariot, the apostle who betrayed Jesus. His death is recorded in the Bible, but even there, the details don't match. In Matthew's Gospel, he hangs himself out of guilt. In Acts, he falls in a field, his body bursting open. The contradictions raise the question, what really happened to him? So, what can we conclude? The reality is that much of what we know about the apostles' deaths comes from later traditions rather than direct historical evidence. While their martyrdoms are central to Christian tradition, the lack of contemporary records means we must approach these stories with caution. Some may be rooted in truth, others may have been shaped by religious and political factors over time, but regardless of whether every detail is accurate, the legacy of the apostles endures. Their stories have inspired millions, shaping the foundation of Christianity as we know it. Their message, their faith, and their sacrifices, whether exaggerated or not, have left an undeniable impact on history. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these stories do you think is the most believable? Do you think we'll ever find more historical evidence about the apostles' deaths? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into history and religion. Thanks for watching.